I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting of today, March 20th. Looks like we have multiple public hearing items. We'll start with roll call, please.
Connell?
Present.
Hepner?
Here.
Ingram?
Present.
Kelling?
Here.
Lammers?
Present.
Manus?
Here.
Martinez? Med?
Here.
Quinn?
Here.
Reinhartz?
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Prior to getting started, since we have such a large crowd, I need to ask everybody to make sure their cell phones are turned off, as it can bleed into our audio recording. So please turn your cell phones off. I also want to say, since we have such a large crowd, if once your petition has been read and you decide you want to leave, please do so in a quiet manner, as we have other business to take care of. I have no problem with people leaving during the meeting. Just please keep your conversation quiet until you exit the council chambers. We'll start first with case number ORD 18-01's public hearing. Let me say one more thing. I think we're going to flip up the new business for the public hearing. We're going to do item B first, the Rockingham Road corridor. We'll start with case number ORD 18-02 is the ordinance amending Title 17 to incorporate a zoning component to promote and create a commercial identity for the Rockingham Road corridor through the use of design and use standards. City of Davenport is the petitioner. Chapter 17.80 of the Davenport Municipal Code allows for text and map amendments. It's part of the first and third wards. Would you like to speak? The petitioner like to speak? Scott?
Okay, on March 15th, we held a neighborhood meeting, and first I should probably start with our packet had a little mix-up there. We had the right report loaded, but it got removed. So the correct report is in front of you now. If you notice on the bottom of the first page is the findings from our neighborhood meeting, some of the issues and themes that we found at the neighborhood meeting. After having the neighborhood meeting on the 15th at the Roosevelt Community Center, we found out a lot of information, but the aldermen and staff felt that we should probably slow down the process. So we would like to have a public hearing tonight, but after the public hearing is held, we're going to remove the item from agenda and come back sometime in June. We would like to prepare a draft code. We would like to talk to some stakeholders and have them give us some input on this, and then go have another neighborhood meeting and another public hearing after we've had time to do those things.
And Scott, point of clarification, that being said, I assume all of the people within the 200-foot boundary, the property owners, stakeholders, will all be re-notified then?
That would be correct, yes.
Thank you, Scott.
But it is our intention to hear anybody tonight who wishes to speak.
Absolutely.
If you want to hear about the neighborhood meeting, I do have some slides on that. Otherwise, we can proceed to do the public hearing.
I would say let's move forward with the public hearing at this point. Would anybody like to step forward and speak in favor of the petition? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak forward and identify themselves and speak in opposition?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Plan and Zone Commission. My name is Michael Malloy. I'm an attorney representing certain business owners in the Rockingham Road corridor. We're a little bit perplexed about what's going on here, Mr. Chairman. We received a notice that today there's going to be a public hearing regarding ordinance number 18-02, an ordinance purportedly amending Title 17 of the Davenport City Code to incorporate certain zoning components on the existing zoning. We came down here last Friday and asked for a copy of the proposed ordinance, and staff told us that it wasn't prepared yet. And we also checked yesterday for this proposed ordinance that supposedly we're having this public hearing today, and the staff says there is none. And we don't understand how there can be a public hearing when there's no staff ordinance that the city of Davenport has just told you that they're the petitioner here, and we don't know what the hell is going on here because there is no ordinance for us to actually read, review, and comment. But I can tell you this, that many of the residents in Rockingham Road don't understand why there's any proposed change here and are opposed to this particular supposed rezoning overlay district. And I just want to ask anybody in the room here tonight who is down here on this matter, who is opposing this particular Davenport ordinance proposal, to please stand or raise your hand. Thank you. As you can see, there's many Rockingham Road residents here who believe that the current zoning ordinance, the current district zoning ordinances that govern this particular corridor that are in effect now are practical and work, and they don't understand why the city is proposing this so-called overlay district on top of the current zoning in this particular area. The staff has not provided any specifics on what this is supposed to do because, like I said, we don't have an actual ordinance to look at here. We don't have anything to read that is legible to comment on. So it's put us in kind of a catch-22 Alice in Wonderland issue here, because we're supposed to have a public hearing called by the city of Davenport today, yet there is no ordinance, and supposedly we're supposed to comment on something that we don't have a copy of or hasn't been actually written yet. So we don't understand why even the public hearing is being called today. It seems rather presumptuous of the city of Davenport staff to have a public hearing on an ordinance that does not exist. And I'm sure there's other people here that want to make their thoughts or ideas to the commission on this particular matter. I'll conclude right now, and I'll ask if anybody has any questions they wish to pose to myself. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward?
My name's Derek Carter. I own multiple properties on the Rockingham corridor, both business and residential. I, along with many other people in this room, understand what it is that the city of Davenport is trying to do. We heard at the informal hearing that a lot of people are not happy with the way that the Rockingham corridor looks. We've got heavy traffic. We have, abandoned buildings and lots and, things down there that ultimately just need cleaned up. And they want to incorporate a commercial identity through design and use standards to give Rockingham that better appeal per se. But why do we need to do that through use standards? Many of us down there on the west end of Davenport do business down there because of the way Rockingham is, whether it's we own properties that are commercial or we own properties that are heavy industrial. We should be allowed to continue to do the things that we have always been able to do down there and purchase these properties to do such things. However, the design standards, that makes sense. Why? If we're bringing new business into the Rockingham area, why not require them to do better upkeep, facelifts per se? Why do we have to hinder property values and the ability to do what we were intended to do when we purchased these properties? There are many other ways that we can accomplish this facelift of Rockingham and make things look presentable without affecting the zoning of that. Code enforcement, is one of them. I know that there are, as in other areas of town, there have been things such as, TIF funds and communities have gotten together to, to vote on things like raise taxes to be able to take care of some of these issues in other parts of town. And I just don't feel that it is fair to the people that have been there, that have invested into and will continue to be on the Rockingham corridor, some of us for the rest of our lives, to tell us that the things that we've been doing down there are not okay, that we can't grow, that we cannot expand, because there are other ways to accomplish what it is the city is trying to accomplish without hindering, business and things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Pardon me, I didn't have anything kind of planned. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. My name is Brian McLean. I live in the West End. I've not lived there quite as long as probably some of these folks have. I would say I have a vested interest as well because I live within 200 feet of Rockingham Road. My question is, right away, is how many of these people actually live within 200 feet of Rockingham Road? Okay, fair enough. I would say that not all of us feel the same way. There was a lot of things that the city discussed at the neighborhood meeting that we liked. Getting rid of gravel parking lots, lighting, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of things that we can work on together to accomplish, to make the corridor a better place. So to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I don't think is a very good idea either. So I would implore the commission to know that there's more than one side to this thing. Limiting the types of businesses that we have in the area so that it doesn't get carried away in one direction. I think we're all open to hearing both sides, but let's do that. Let's hear both sides. Let's not just say, hey, you had more people show up at the meeting, you win. Let's make sure that we hear both sides, or more than two sides if that's what it is. But let's let the city, come through and help us out with this. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Randy Dyer. I've been a West End resident for 60 years, almost 60 years now. And I understand that this proposal or whatever is going to limit businesses down on the Rockingham corridor. Well, the city, I don't feel, has done anything down there to get any kind of business even going. And I don't understand why you'd want to stop people from starting a business up down there. It doesn't make no sense to me, because she's like the West End down there is like the last place the city spends any money at all anyway. So you've got people that want to start a business up down there. I'm totally for that. And we need a little more growth down in the West End, because nothing happens down at the Burger Kings. It's like, wow, we got a new Burger King. That's it. You've got Elmore and all that out there. They get everything, but down there they don't do nothing. So I'm all for the guys starting a business, a legitimate legal business. I'm fine with that. Anything down there to help the West End grow a little bit. I think a lot of us feel that we need that down there. So I'm all for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is John Martin, and some of you may know me, some of you may not. I am the owner of Boat Motors, and I also, and I've asked this question to multiple city leaders and employees, what's their plan? And once again, we don't have a plan. It appears to me that we have a blanket proposal for a rezoning with all these wonderful flowers and planters and fun centers and all that great stuff, which I'm all for it. However, we don't have a set plan. So it's kind of like beat a dead horse. I think we've made that point already, that there's no set plan, and well, I guess why are we here if there's no set plan? But the last thing we want to happen is there's something to get passed with no set plan, basically a blanket rezoning for whatever reason, and no one has any say so. So this is I imagine probably the beginning of something a lot bigger, as far as rezoning goes, or as far as the Rockingham corridor. And like I said, I'm all for it. Okay, if any of you guys have ever driven past my place, you probably know that I kind of take pride. I do take pride in my business. I take pride in the appearance. I take pride in doing good business. I take pride in everything about it. Some of you may be aware that I also own the Burger King building, and probably haven't made very many people happy because of the way it looks right now. Because I have cars there being stored there, which we're going to get them out of there. But the reason why they're there now is because of this moratorium that was put in place, which we're still trying to figure that out, because what we have is a moratorium that's stopping any new business coming in the area. If you weren't already existing, you won't be able to start any other new businesses, okay? This is something that took place shortly after I purchased the Burger King building. What is really strange to me is how after I purchased this building, we have a moratorium put in place stating that there will be no more car dealerships, or they don't want any more car dealerships, or any other businesses down there for that matter. It was brought to my attention that our first ward alderman actually was the individual that decided he did not want any more car dealerships. I spoke with him. Nice guy, great guy. I like him. But I'm still trying to understand why this gentleman decided to, what was said, get with his constituents and put this moratorium in place on the Rockingham Road corridor, and because it's making no sense to me. So we spoke about this, like I said, and he said that he, pretty much in his words, he said he does what the people want. Okay. So people, I'm assuming, because I asked him the question, if he stopped it because he didn't want any more used car dealerships, and he says, well, I do what the people want. What people? What people? I mean, I'm standing back here right now. I mean, I looked back just a second ago when Mr. Malloy asked everyone that was not in favor of it to stand up. What people? Can anybody explain that to me? Where are these people, these so-called people that are in favor of rezoning Rockingham Road and kicking out all the car dealerships or whatever they're planning on kicking out? Where are all these people at? So that's what we're looking for, and hope to see it here in the next coming months. We get some better understanding of what's going on here, so we can continue to move forward as business owners, as people in the community, without wondering if we're going to wake up tomorrow and find out that we got to pave 3 square feet or 300 square feet of gravel because someone's got some bright idea that they don't want gravel lots anymore. Right? Because if I'm not mistaken, the last proposal, they talked about in this new zoning that they would, gravel lots. It's an issue. I don't know if you guys know much about concrete or blacktopping, but it's very expensive. So where's this money going to come from? So that's going to be a big question. Where's the money going to come from to concrete 3 acres, I should say, 2.5, 3 acres of gravel? This is very, 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 very important to everybody that's on the Rockingham Road. And whether it's yay or nay, I will say this right here. Know what you're voting for. Educate yourself, know what you're voting for. Don't allow someone just to tell you that you're going to be voting for these wonderful trees and pillars and wider sidewalks, all those good things. Know what you're voting for. Because if not, you might end up with something you really don't want.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak for or come forward and speak?
Hello, Kyle Smith. Been a downtown business my whole life. Third generation car dealer. Not necessarily part of the Rockingham corridor, but am affected by what is going on by the city. And I just want to say, you know, it seems like the city's trying to prevent growth, opportunity for business people. You know, as I drive around town, you know, you see an awful lot of empty buildings, see an awful lot of businesses going under, and it almost seems like the city's wanting to be growth prevention as far as business goes, and they only want their certain things that they want. You know, car dealers provide a service for people. People need cars. Not everybody can go to the glamorous big box car dealers and buy a $20,000 to $30,000, $40,000 car. Some people are bottom feeders. They need to buy transportation to get around. And it just, I don't understand if a guy's in business, investing in his business, promoting his business, trying to do the best for his business and his family, why the city thinks that it's their mission to shut them down or limit them to what they can do. My grandfather started in 1935 as a used car dealer in this town. And my family's been paying taxes to this town the whole time. I mean, Rockingham doesn't affect me, but what is going on affects me and my business. So I just want everybody to be aware that it seems like growth prevention to me. And that's all.
Thank you. Let's hold the applause down. We got a lot of people here that might want to speak. Let's keep this moving. Anybody else like to step forward? Seeing none. Scott, I'd like you to come up and give your presentation now that the neighbors have spoke.
Well, for what we did at the 15th, we presented some ideas and options for how the zoning ordinance can improve and create a new identity, a corridor identity here for Rockingham. This was the meeting outline. And I guess I will say, when it comes to limiting uses, the plan for the overlay would not kick any business out of the corridor. It would allow anything that became non-conforming to remain there. So if, for example, the overlay didn't allow new businesses to come in for auto sales, the existing auto sales businesses would still be able to remain if that's what went through with the plan, which may or may not happen, but that's how it would work. Regarding parking lots, gravel parking lots, right now anybody who has a greenfield site that is a site that has nothing built on it, if they want to have a business there, anything that is required for parking, like a parking lot or a place where vehicles are going to drive on, they're all required to be paved. The only gravel lots in Davenport right now are lots that have been maintained since 1987. So those lots are allowed right now under the existing code to be there as gravel lots. Now, if you completely tear down the site and it's vacant for a number of years, you have to pave that lot. But if you continually use the lot as a business, you can continually maintain it as gravel. So that's what a lot of the gravel lots in that area are at this time. So for the purpose of the meeting was to introduce the neighborhood to the concept of overlay zoning, where the base zoning stays and remains. For example, there's a lot of C2 and industrial properties in the corridor. That base zoning is going to remain, but the overlay allows you to put additional restrictions on the property. So for example, in C2, certain uses are allowed. For example, you can have restaurants, you can have personal service establishments, you can have auto sales. So if the community decided to limit auto sales, that could be a use that's normally allowed in a C2 that would be removed from the list that's allowed. So if a new business owner came in and wanted to do auto sales, that would be a use that we'd say at this time that's use not allowed there. So that's something the ordinance overlay could do. The other thing the overlay can do is it can impose different and better, higher, above standard design standards. So for example, the one thing that the new ordinance could do is could say that a new business coming in must have a front door that faces the street. And the example on the top has a business where the front door does face the street. Some of the businesses in the corridor do not have front doors that face the street. So the example on the bottom, there is no front door that faces the street in this example. So that's something that you can do by increasing your design standards. Another design standard that the community could choose to look at or could choose to approve would be to, anytime you have a blank wall over so many feet, that you require different design elements like a base or pilasters or different vertical change in material to provide some sort of breakup for this continuous wall. So those are some of the options that we looked at during the meeting. We also looked at some of the things that are in our site plan standards right now, where you require a setback for parking. So this photo here shows the parking right up to the curb. Our site plan standards right now don't allow you to have the parking lot right up to the curb. They require either a 10-foot setback or a 5-foot setback with a 42-inch hedge. So this photo above here shows that if you put the sidewalk back and then have your use behind the sidewalk, it leaves room for landscaping along the sidewalk where pedestrians feel safe from the vehicles traveling on the road. So that some of these are some of the things that we looked at for design elements when we were there. So after we presented the options that they have with the zoning overlay, where they can limit uses or they could have additional design standards, we asked the neighbors and the business owners who were at the meeting, we asked them for some of their ideas and themes that they thought were important to their community. And these are those ideas that we came up with, or the residents and business owners came up with, and they're listed here. They tend to fall into three different areas. There's use restrictions, there's design standards, but there was also quite a few comments regarding economics, whether or not they should establish a TIF or a SMID, which would be great vehicles to help out the Rockingham corridor, improve the type of businesses they get there and what they could do in the public arena. They could use, for example, in the SMID, you can use money to improve the corridor in the public right-of-way. So that's what we talked about and discussed at the public meeting.
Thank you, Scott. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time? Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, what was the primary impetus to the moratorium on new business licenses by the council back in November, October, whenever it was?
I wasn't there when that was enacted, but my understanding is that they wanted to look at the corridor. There have been two planning efforts in the corridor over time. There's the older commercial corridor, which had a specific section on Rockingham Road, and there's also the West End Focus Plan that's put into play. And both of those documents looked at improving the corridor, and so there's been a lot of public input put into both of those documents, and the overwhelming majority of the comments were that we need to improve the character of the area, we need to improve the quality of the corridor, and so I think that's part of the reason they had the moratorium, but I think another part of the reason was that certain uses were felt to be out of line. So they had the moratorium so that we could work on a plan to address those issues.
Would it not be a little more fair to the property owners, business owners, to leave what is in place until we in the commission, as well as perhaps the council, had time to entertain this new ordinance?
You mean without a moratorium?
Right.
I don't make those decisions, so I don't really know how to answer that.
I realize, but what happens to the moratorium now that this whole discussion has been postponed until June or whatever it is? Is it going to remain in place, or will it be waived?
The moratorium would be extended until this planning effort was completed. Proposed for a 90-day extension is what is proposed at this time. It hasn't gone forward to the council at this time, though.
Okay. To use an example given in our packet of present usage, if there's a barber shop down on the Rockingham corridor right now, and that owner wants to sell to another business, do I understand this ordinance correctly, that a different type of business would not be permitted under the new provision? In other words, if I approach the barbershop owner and say that I want to open up a real estate operation or an insurance office, would that be permitted under the new rules?
Well, we don't have new rules established at this time.
All right. But if they were, if the new rules were established, what would be the anticipation?
I don't know what the new rules would state.
Okay.
So if barber shops were not allowed under the new rules, then you would not be able to sell a non-barber shop and say, I'm going to convert that business into a barber shop, if that use happened to be restricted with the new rules.
Who makes the new rules?
Well, that's why we're having the public process to have the public meeting, the neighborhood meeting, to have the public hearing, and that's why we're going to do the stakeholder meeting. So that's where the new rules are going to be coming from.
One further question, and I'll yield. If the new rules would prohibit me from opening up an insurance or real estate office down there, would I automatically be facing new design standards on that building then?
It depends on how the rules would be written. A lot of times the new design standards are phased in with new buildings or a significant upgrade of an existing building. So if you spent more than 65% of the value of the building, maybe they would come into play or something like that. But it all depends on how the code is structured.
I guess I have some concerns about the cost of the new business owner would face under these new rules. I assume somewhere in the discussions there'll be adequate attention paid to that, so that the costs of opening a new business or redesigning an existing building would be affordable and not oppressive.
I would hope that the public would take that into account when they recommended what their course of action will be for this plan.
All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lammers.
On the use restrictions, design standards, and economic issues that you just showed, am I correct that those are resident and business owner contributions, not city staff contributions?
Right. Those are at the end of the short presentation, it was about a 10 to 15 minute presentation. We opened it up to have comments from residents and business owners, and those were the comments that we received.
And are the ones listed multiple people saying are these concerns or recommendations? Or
I
were
would
they
I would say about maybe 2/3 of them were more than one person recommending, but some of those ideas were only mentioned by one person. But it's hard to gauge how many people in the room also agreed with the comment.
I'm just trying to grasp if this is consensus or if this is individual contributions.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Oops.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Manus.
Scott, is this being addressed by staff separately from the overall rezoning ordinance that the consultant is working on? Because there is so much interest by the owners and neighbors right now.
It's hoped that we can fold this into the new ordinance so that we can make it consistent with the new ordinance and so it would play an integral part of the new ordinance.
But staff is proceeding with it on its own because of the interest of owners and neighbors?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And the schedule that you outlined, is that the most feasible and quickest way to get this before the decision makers here and get input?
In order to have a fair amount of time for the input and the creation of the ordinance, a 90-day extension, which would include the time to approve the new ordinance, which means that it has to be done before the end of June, and then you figure out when the next public hearing is, and so, yeah, the 19th would be the last date that we could have the public hearing and still get in before the end of the 90-day extension would expire.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Reinhardt.
I think this is directed at you, Mr. Chairman. Are we going to be expected to vote on this thing this evening?
No.
No.
This
Okay.
is a public hearing.
Okay.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, thank you, Scott. We will close case number ORD 18-02. And just to let everybody know, this will be back in front of us again. There will be another public hearing. It'll be down the road. You will, if you're a neighborhood member within 200 feet of Rockingham, you will be notified, and we will go through the next step of the process. And I appreciate your attendance tonight. Thank you. Next item of business is case number ORD 18-01 is a public hearing for a proposed amendment to the Davenport zoning ordinance title 17.41 of the municipal code, creating an Elmore Corners overlay district, ECOD, and design standards controlling development within said district in the 6th Ward. Staff?
Where'd everybody go?
Apparently they didn't want to hear you speak.
Apparently.
And you thought they
We're
were all
talking about the same subject.
You thought they were all here for you. Instead, it was Scott.
Thank you. I'm Matt Flynn, Community Planning and Economic Development Department. I want to talk about a different but similar project. And I know that some of you have been involved. I want to give just a little bit of context of why are we doing these design standards, these overlays in general. Maybe we can talk a little bit more at the end of the regular meeting about the Rockingham Road process. But both the Rockingham Road overlay and the Elmore Corners overlay are kind of the result of basically requests to us to take zoning another step and try and look at ways to address issues that are very unique to a specific location. There's nothing devious or underhanded about it, but I think in both cases that it gives us opportunities. And in the Rockingham Road situation, we have the city. I won't disagree. Maybe after too long of a wait, actually doing significant infrastructure improvements in the area, and we're basically trying to set the table for investment. Here in Elmore Corners, we have the extension of Elmore Avenue, and the construction of the casino has, quote, opened up a lot of additional land in the community, and the recognition that our elected officials and others and business and property owners said it's like, we have one shot here. Let's not blow it. Let's not just accept what has been status quo for Davenport development. Let's try and make something that's truly unique, that we can all be proud of, recognizing something that's going to take many, many years, if not decades, to build out. So we did embark on a planning process. Unlike the Rockingham Road corridor, where we were doing that in-house, meaning by our staff, the city actually employed a planning and zoning consultant, Vandewally and Associates out of Madison, to help the city through this planning process. And I guess I kind of encapsulated why we're doing this here. There's another statement. This is, for those of you who are at some of our neighborhood meetings, this is going to be a little redundant. We've had two. We had one in, I believe, it was January 22nd. We also had one on February 22nd. A lot of the information is going to be the same. So if you're hoping for a lot new information, there's maybe just a little bit, but not a lot. So we call it an overlay district. Yeah, it is a rezoning. We're establishing an overlay district, but a lot of what we're doing is we're adding additional dimensions with respect to design on an area that is, for the most part, already zoned for commercial uses. There are a couple distinctions where, again, maybe similar to where we may be headed on Rockingham, actually looking at that fairly large list of permitted uses and saying, we really don't want these 3 or 4 here or expanded. We'll get to those in a minute. So a lot of what we're doing is this planning document is going to be used really as marketing. Occasionally we get people who come in and they see the 2 interstates and they see Elmore and 53rd. They see all the rooftops, see all the cars, and they're looking for opportunities. Sometimes they'll come in, they've got their plan, and it's like, here you go. But actually, some people actually come to us and say, what is your vision for the area? Now, planners, we don't usually like to, shoot off the cuff. This will give us an opportunity to say, well, the community's gone through a process, and this is the shared community vision for the North Elmore area, or what's being branded as Elmore Corners. So what does the plan actually contain? I mean, it's a series of exercises, and you'll see we'll get, from a land use and design standpoint, we'll get a little bit more detail. We'll go from the bubble diagram to, sketch plans, and maybe to something a little bit more specific, including some illustrations and photographs showing development that may meet some of these standards that we're going to be bringing forward. I'll talk just a little bit about branding and marketing. That's really kind of falls outside the Planning and Zoning Commission's realm. The design standards we'll definitely want to talk about. Those were included in your packet. We've drafted them in a way that they're actually an amendment to the highway corridor overlay standards that already exist in this area, but actually takes it indeed further. Also, this plan starts to look at things like street layout, circulation, street cross sections, location of bike paths, trails, urban greenways. We'll talk about that a little bit further as well. But it'd be a number of things. One of the things, and slide never came off like I hoped it would, but sometimes you read in the paper and it's like, well, the city needs to bring Bob's Big Boy back to the community. This is not an effort to do that. If you're interested in particular retailers, another one that comes up is the Bass Pro Shops, Whole Foods, Costco for a while. Maybe we can check that off. But I think what we're showing to potential retailers that we have a vision here, and you potentially belong in this vision. Now that's not to say if you really want a Bass Pro Shop to come, contact the company. We've heard how companies can be persuaded like that, but the city, by our job, our role as city employees, is to not target retail businesses and quote go after them with either incentives or just sales pitches. So this is the project area. I should remember how many acres. Is it 270? Does that sound about right? Anyway, you can see in the light purple, the vast majority of the area is already zoned PDD planned development. You can see some areas zoned actually for agriculture, the green. There is a little bit of strip of R1. Now, you can't do commercial in those areas now, so if a development proposal came forward there, we'd be looking at rezoning. As we look at the entire new zoning ordinance / map process, we'll probably address some of those proactively and actually have those under a commercial zoning classification. Again, as we try and get a little bit more detailed, this was a conceptual plan that was drafted up, showing in very generalized ways how development may start to come together and fit here. And that's another thing that we're trying to accomplish, is making sure that development, there's 270 acres or so. There are a lot of opportunities, potential for millions, if not billions of dollars being invested in the area. We want to make sure that all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, that there's connectivity between developments. That means you don't need to go all the way back out to Elmore to get to the store right next to you. And every community has its example of situations where maybe you don't think about it. Maybe since you're planners, you get frustrated like I do. But what's it take to go from Target to Best Buy in this town? They're right there, right next to one another. It's probably about 30 feet of concrete to connect the parking lots. But no, that doesn't occur. That's not a unique Davenport thing. There's communities all over the place. Well, what happened is that the city lacked the teeth to require that connection. Going through a planning process, we can be a lot more prescriptive in terms of making sure those connections are made, and you're not forcing everybody, either pedestrians or cars, to go back out to Elmore just to go to the store next door. I don't want to spend forever here, but going ahead, there were sub areas that were created as part of the project. We'll go through those briefly, what they are, and see if you have got any questions. So the first area would be the entertainment district. This is the area just kind of east and southeast of the casino, and again showing how here's Elmore here, but seeing how you can make connections between this development and associated development, either being retail or additional hotels. This is just a concept, the idea of the kind of the Top Golf kind of facilities. You could have bowling alleys, movie theaters up in this area, uses that are going to be complementary to the casino and the hotel there. Also, you'll the colors that you'll see, we're going to get in this other area. The red generally means these are commercial buildings in their entirety. The ones with crosshatches, these are potential for mixed-use buildings, either retail or services on the first level and residential above. And yellow may be just residential buildings. So again, this is area. Here's Call Home that Commissioner Reinertz and myself know pretty well. So we have relatives there. But hey, so there's Call Home. Here's a Veterans Memorial Drive, currently under construction, the intersection of Elmore. So this is an area where it could accommodate quite a bit of residential, maybe some commercial mixed in. Really an opportunity to create kind of more of an urban village. In the plan documents, there may be a potential for showing how many units this whole area could accommodate in terms of new residential. It's several hundred, maybe over 500 units. And if you look at what the city absorbs in a year, it's many, even just the development within Elmore Corners would be many, many years of growth given the city's current growth boundaries. So again, I think it kind of gives you an idea of how this plan helps set the table for the long term. Going down Elmore, again, this is it Cross Creek? I always forget what the marketing name. This is Cross Creek, and then Walmart is immediately to the south. A lot of vacant land. The Mills Chevrolet is at the southwest corner of Elmore and Veterans, but really a good, if not great, site for a real high quality development across the street, as this plan shows, possibly being anchored by a big box store, a larger retail store, and again some mixed use development as we go. This would be west of the casino. Possibly some casino-related entertainment. Could that be a smaller, I'll call it a junior arena that would complement what happens at the Tax Slayer Center? I had to think of what the name was. Perhaps. I can tell you that the casino ownership they're not saying they're going to build this, but they like the idea of possibly, that being somewhere down the line, as well as more we'll call business office park. We know the office market isn't really booming great guns, but as you go down 53rd Street towards Bettendorf, there's still, seeming one or two a year new office buildings going up there. That area is going to be developed out pretty quick. This might be a good complement to that kind of development. Further down, west side of Elmore. This shows more kind of the mixed-use buildings, maybe some apartments, and also what was depicted as an urban greenway. Now, the first neighborhood meeting we had a lot of people show up concerned about what that urban greenway meant. As you look at the design standards, which are very deliberate statements that say, use the terms shall and must versus may and desirable. We really talk about this greenway in I'll say a more passive way, that, this urban greenway, I think, would have community value, but maybe most likely would be pursued by developers of these individual projects as they come forward. I think if they're seen as a community amenity, an amenity to their developments, it may proceed. But if we had a developer not willing to not only build those and pay for their maintenance, may not happen. So again, this isn't the cornerstone of the entire planning effort, but again, as I said at the first meeting, did bring people out. Whatever it takes. If it's not food, put on something controversial. Again, the kind of the marketing efforts, using signage and wayfinding kind of as a unifying theme, again, to just kind of, I'll say, heighten the perception of the area. They probably won't find their way into zoning other than, maybe in some platting efforts. Hoping my voice will hold out. So really, there's two things that will be before the Plan and Zoning Commission at the next meeting. There'll be adoption or consideration of an amendment to the comp plan, which would be the Elmore Corners plan, and then there would be the text amendment, which would be the zoning guidelines. And I included a draft in your packet. Things in red were basically new language there, but won't deal a whole lot because you're pretty versed with design standards already. But the idea behind them is to raise the bar, if you will. Have you ever been in a community where you see, who we want to pick on? Casey's General Store. No, let's pick on Dollar General. And there's a specific example here, Ryan's here. Dollar General comes in many different prototypes. You go to some communities, it's like brick, awnings, the whole 9 yards. Other places that basically look like pole buildings. And, a lot of, and this is not a cut on Dollar General, but a lot of national retailers will maybe use the lowest common denominator. If they don't have to meet the standard, they won't. That's why you see, Walmart's looking different. Some just are mixed up, but a lot of times the specifics are driven by the local community's design guidelines. So again, a lot of things went in they're pretty complicated, that what's in the ordinance, but they deal with not only the architecture of the buildings, the site planning, making sure that buildings are brought forward towards the street, given more of an urban feel than just another store behind a sea of suburban parking. We'll get into signage. Let's do some stuff that's fun with signage, that it takes it beyond the routine. And again, if you were at my earlier things, I've got my favorite McDonald's sign of all time. That's the mauve arches. And the mauve arches are in Sedona, Arizona, because they didn't want green. Well, McDonald's wanted to be there so badly, they were willing to give up their a primary identifying mark, if you will, and go with the mauve arches. We're not proposing that, but I just always love that. Getting into parking, again, you'll see a lot of this in our new code as it moves forward, but just making sure that parkings are actually integrated with the development, not just something tacked on and more or less just a miserable experience. That includes modern stormwater infiltration systems, detention, and also helps the pedestrian move around. Again, I mentioned the public spaces, making sure there's coordination, establishing high levels. Then again, this is how we might be able to work with the public realm, meaning streets and sidewalks, whatnot, to help the various pieces as they come forward fit into what's an overall master plan. Wrapping up here. So how are we going to administer this animal? It's going to be similar to the Highway Corridor Overlay District. For the more veteran members of the commission will remember when site plans were reviewed by a subcommittee of the P&Z. Staff has been doing that for probably pushing 10 years now. That would usually, that's how we're proposing this to be administered. Now, there's a couple appeals that could happen if we weren't able to work with the developer. There were just certain things that we got into an impasse. There would be an appeal to the design review board, and actually decisions of the design review board are actually could be appealed to the city council. So those are a couple ways to ensure that it's not just simply staff calling the shots as part of this process. Then the next steps, as I mentioned, we should be ready with the recommendation at the next meeting on April 3rd, and then we'll be moving on to the committee of the whole. It's public hearing and first reading. With that, sorry it took so long. Be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Appreciate it, Matt. Commissioner Med.
Thank you. Matt, is there a similar moratorium on this area like we talked to us about at Rockingham?
No, there was not a moratorium established.
And why would that be?
Again, there's political reasons for doing moratorium. Sometimes, it is a big deal to establish a moratorium because you're basically putting the brakes on everything. I think in the case for North Elmore, I can tell you there's nobody that we are actively working with on development plans in North Elmore. So it seems like we had a nice window to work with. Whereas what's happening on Rockingham, that situation might be considered a little bit more dynamic. And again, it was driven. It was the elected officials that ultimately decide. Just like I think Mr. Kelling asked, well, who ultimately decides here? Well, it's an ordinance amendment ultimately decided by the city council, and why this is no moratorium and Rockingham is a moratorium. Those are decisions that really kind of, done by council, with advice to us on, how to proceed.
Is it possible that a business would try to come in while we're trying to finish this thing and we'd have to deal with that, or?
Yeah, we would have to deal with it. Of course, we would try to work with them. We'd say we're say 60 days away from adopting a plan and a new fresh vision for the area. If they came forward and said, I want to build this pole building, we'd have to deal with that. But of course we'd try to convince them otherwise. Chances are with the land values that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hepner.
Thank you. Matt, did a RFP go out for the planning process on this?
For this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How many others participated in that? Just curious.
I don't know. We did not manage that process. It was managed by the city administrator's office. I think Mallory Merritt is here. Was she? Do you know? There was an RFP.
Yeah, I don't know how many responded, but we can find out.
We can find out.
We've used Vanderwall in the past, City of Davenport, is that correct?
Well, I can speak. I have not personally hired them before. They've done a lot of work in the Quad Cities.
Okay.
A lot of work in Moline.
Just wondering if it's the same company.
But, they're highly regarded.
Okay. This document's not baked yet. What percentage complete is it, would you say?
The Elmore Corners plan.
Correct.
That's
stuff in red.
That's we're here to discuss if you've got specific issues. In this case, rather than having a lot of the illustrations in the ordinance itself, at least at this step, we'd be looking at using the plan document for guidance. So what's the percentage? 99%.
Okay, I got some questions. Maybe we can go to 90% then.
Okay.
How about that? When we talk about quality design, buildings shall be of quality design. How do you define that, and how is that enforceable?
Well, I think you look at lasting materials, ease of maintenance, even cost.
Okay, that's pretty broad. But,
It is broad.
But how do you define quality design? I guess that's kind of a ambiguous phrase here that it's hard to get your arms around. And should we maybe get our arms around that before we approve something?
Again, this time we'll use Sedona, Arizona as an example, which has a very specific color palette. Probably says that everything will be in Adobe stucco. Very specific. We are not proposing that. So, you can have, it's kind of beauty in the eye of the beholder. We have examples that are within the code, whether or not we're talking about, Chicago brick, glazed brick, split face block.
We're not going to get that specific though in this.
No, we're not going to. So though it's hard to say this is quality, this is not, other than recognizing that there may be some subjectivity, and that ultimately the design review board and council would have an opportunity.
So they're gonna preside over that process.
If again at an impasse, yeah.
Okay, if there's not an impasse, who presides over that then?
It would be the plans would be approved, part of our site plan.
So your department
process.
does that?
The what?
Your department will do that?
Yeah. Now the one thing would be also would be as its own plan development district now, they'd also have to go through the final development process. So I would suspect that we would be including our position on the ultimate design as part of any final development plan approval. But in the new code, likely PDD is going away. Will be going more towards a development by right. If that makes any sense.
Development by right. No, that doesn't
Meaning,
make sense to me.
if you meet the, if you get through, you don't have to go to the city council through P&Z and council in order to get a development within the Elmore Corners area approved. You'd submit your plans much like you do today, where you just have site plan review, which is part of, I guess, our role in the whole development review process.
Okay. When we go through architectural form here and we talk about buildings shall be primarily rectangular in form, can that be struck? I don't know of a rectangular building that's halfway. Well, we want to challenge our developers here and our people, I think, and is rectangular always the best option? I don't know that it is here.
Well, again, as the design concepts were
It's kind of loose.
from
I
the
know,
plan
we're looking at square boxes
developed
here.
by Van de Walle. I can't sit here and tell you we pondered that particular
versus triangular
comment
Yeah,
with.
So moving on to
So my response would be I don't have a problem at all striking that.
Okay, so I hope somebody's taking notes here, but when we go to inappropriate materials, I would think that unfinished poured in place concrete is an appropriate material. I think it's a great material to use. It's timeless, as well as corrugated metal. I think that should be pulled off the inappropriate materials list. Those are some of my opinions. Sorry to go through all this with you guys, but I think that's really the basis of my comments right now. Stormwater management, when we talk about collecting roof water into purple pipe, gray water systems to reuse for irrigation, toilets or other non-potable uses, is that a requirement here?
No, we'd be working with our natural resources people to advance some of those standards.
Okay. I guess that's really all I have right now, Bob.
Thank you. Turn your mic off, please. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. My question is more concerned about the protecting of the neighborhoods, the impact it's going to have on the interface areas. When I think back to when that southwest corner of Elmore and 53rd was developed, when they put in the grocery store and the Verizon store and Dick's, and they put in American Furniture, they went to great lengths to make sure that there was a fairly large buffer zone between that development and the housing area that it butted up against. I'm wondering, also, when the casino went in, there were some concessions made to the neighborhood where there were going to be, under protecting neighborhoods, there was going to be like an 8-foot berm on the north side of Veterans Memorial Parkway to kind of shield some of the future development from interfering with the physical views from the neighbors. I'm of the belief that the urban greenway is designed to kind of help buffer that zone. I remember from the one meeting that I attended that there was a lot of concern about people's physical view when they look out the back of their property, seeing what exists right now, Mill Chevrolet, and they don't want to have that throughout the development. There are homes in there that go up as high as probably $1 million. Would it be difficult to put into the overlay a requirement for the backside of the properties that were developed, some type of earthen berm or mandatory screening, much like what was done on that southwest corner of Elmore and 53rd when it was developed, just to kind of buffer that zone so they don't have to deal with a lot of backs of buildings or whatever winds up being there. Is that possible?
You're asking, it's possible.
To put it in the overlay.
I think when you start to
Requirement.
dictate, there will be a berm here. We don't know what here is. We don't know what grades are. I think it kind of hand ties the design process. There may be in my opinion, without knowing what's being proposed, there may be instances where a berm is highly appropriate. There may be places where it just seems impractical. I've seen a lot of berms called the berms to nowhere. Berms built, they serve no purpose, and they're just a pain to maintain. That would be my hesitation to simply just require a berm. We want a berm here. Think of the topography as well. You've got areas that maybe a developer wants to really use the existing topography there, and you're talking about building a berm in a valley, basically. Again, I'm not against all berms. I just think they.
Well, maybe the use of the berm is a bad word. I'm thinking of some type of screening or visual aid that eliminates looking at the backsides of a lot of different buildings. It seemed to me, and I may be mistaken, that the urban greenway is kind of an optional thing, that if the developer wants to put it in, he can put it in. If he doesn't, well, there's no requirement. I think there ought to be something that provides some type of screening. I would think so. I mean, there was a lot of people that were objected to it.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. I guess my response would be is that to screen or shield a building from, it's like saying, and I use this example flippantly, that when I'm walking in my back door by Vanderveer Park in the winter when the leaves are down, I can see Northwest Bank building very clearly. To me, it's not really impacting me. So I think what we want to ensure is that we're using zoning and design standards to a way to make areas compatible with one another, not simply just screening off one use from another. So when you say, well, the backside of a grocery store should be shielded from a single-family home, are you saying all the way, with a fence 40 feet up, all the way so you can't see air handling units on the top, or parapets, or light standards? It's kind of restrictive. I hear what you're saying, and I can only offer that as we go through our design review processes, we're going to be seeking ways to make uses compatible. And I think by what's being proposed does a lot more than what our current tools are at our disposal.
Okay.
Commissioner Med.
Thank you, Matt. I'll be quick on this. I hate to talk more about berms, but under the Elmore corridor discussion, it actually says the plan recommends removing a berm. But if the berm is not removed, then the uses of the site would be residential. So it sounds like the plan recommends removing a berm to accommodate commercial development. But if the berm stays, then it will accommodate residential. Am I reading that correctly here? And if we're not going to dictate whether a berm should be there or not, why would it recommend removing a berm?
I'd have to look at that. It may be one of those provisions that's it's kind of like a chicken and egg provision, where it's like, well, if it's in our existing code. How can I articulate this? If you have commercial, so you have two uses that are built, and there's a buffer yard, berm, whatever built between those. One of the business, and it's the commercial. You have a store and you have an apartment building. The store is considered more intense than the apartment building. So when the store went in, it had to build the berm. If this apartment building, say, was built to a lower density, and they added units or whatever, or if it went from an apartment building, it went the other way, it went to fewer units or went to single family, it doesn't conversely require the commercial development that located there legally to add more density. It's kind of it's like a performance-based approach, but we can look at that. I just can't.
Yeah. Well, I can understand why you don't want to have the plan saying you should do a berm or you shouldn't, but that's why I was surprised to read that here they wanted to actually recommending removing one. So that was the only.
Is it a specific berm, or is it speaking in generality?
It's under the Elmore corridor discussion, page 17 of the plat. So you can look at it later. I just was curious why we'd recommend removing one if we aren't going to be that specific.
I'm not sure where any are, other than maybe the
couldn't
one on
picture
the
out
south
what it was
side
either.
by the park, on the south side of Veterans.
It appears that they're building a berm on the north side of Veterans as well, or maybe they're just throwing the dirt there. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you. Matt, I came away from the discussion earlier tonight on the Rockingham thing about the rulemaking process, wondering, uncertain as to how that plays out. Who creates them? Who formulates them? Are the rules in place already for the Elmore corridor? And if not, who's going to write those?
Well, the rules are in the draft of the zoning ordinance amendment, the creation of that Elmore Corners overlay district, and the design standards that will be also guided by the adoption not only of the city's comprehensive plan, but this Elmore Corners Elmore Corners plan, which would be considered maybe a little bit stronger microscope as far as how we want to see development occur. So that exists in this case. One of the things that maybe we should have stressed more in the Rockingham situation is the ideas that came out the neighborhood meeting. This is a continuation of the discussion we've had since the older commercial corridor study was adopted in 2008. This is not something new. We heard it in 2008. We heard it when the West End area plan was adopted about 4 years ago. As part of Davenport New, these same themes are continuing. Now we're taking the next step by looking at an overlay and design guidelines. We had the neighborhood meeting, as we totally expected. We heard a lot of the themes of the continuing issues in that area. Here we're a little bit more further along because we actually have a draft plan already in hand where we haven't maybe spent a lot of time talking about the plan. We're talking more about that overlay, that zoning amendment, which is the implementation tool of that plan. But we're bringing them forward at the same time before you and then ultimately council.
Well, it makes sense that on Elmore, there's not nearly as many residents to placate as opposed to down in the Rockingham corridor. I mean, right? I mean,
it's the same reason why you see development on the edge. It's the path of least resistance. Admittedly, this planning process has been easy compared to Rockingham, and that's a compliment to the engaged citizens in that area. You want a worst case scenario, having a neighborhood that's not involved and not concerned what's going on. So I don't want to downplay this process, but even though we're kind of talking about the same thing, they're really different. The dynamics are definitely different because you have a built-in constituency on the Rockingham Road area.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Manus.
Matt, I wanted to go back to the urban greenways because to me that looks like a major feature here that would require commitment from private development to make it happen. And I got the feeling that you were saying this draft says maybe it'll be there, maybe it won't, but I would say it's a big project as I read the description of it here, and you would need to get developers to buy into it and make it part of any project that comes through here, unless you are looking for some city funding of a whole new system, which I did not get the feeling is what was planned.
Well, we have an opportunity now to have it development driven. I can't say in 30 years the city might want to come forward and say maybe it makes sense that we as a city develop this at this time. That's a possibility. It will probably be more expensive and maybe painful. In a perfect world, I think some people would love to see the city be more proactive in terms of, building and enhancing our trail system. I think in this case, A, a lot of the neighbors are concerned about that, and B, that as far as our urban trail system, this is a minor, if not really not integral part of that. So that's the reason behind maybe some softer language.
So this is like a good idea, but we're not really going to take steps in our ordinance to make it happen?
It's kind of like a lot. Again, going back to the first slide, this is a picture of what could be, and some of it admittedly is to inspire. The Elmore Corners will not develop like that. Will it be inspired by some of the ideas that we we talked about in 2018. I hope so. But we just thought that was one area of the plan that's probably less important.
And I'm struggling with how this is a zoning ordinance. This is not a comprehensive plan, right?
It's both. It's the plan and then the associated zoning ordinance text amendment and creation of an overlay, which would be, you know, the, as I called it, the implementation part.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, we will close case number ORD.
It's a public hearing, and there may be people in the audience who want to speak.
Oh, that's correct. I forgot. Would anybody in the audience like to speak on the Elmore Corners overlay? Seeing none? Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your presentation. We will close ORD 18-01. Move on to case number ORD-18 or 18-03, the request for the City of Davenport to amend Title 17 of the Davenport Municipal Code entitled Zoning by amending Section 17.48.020.c by adding sale and storage of fireworks and explosive devices to the list of uses requiring a special use permit in the M2 Heavy Industrial District for all wards. Ryan.
Just a brief 20-minute presentation, and we'll. Thank you. With the recent changes in the state to really prohibit us, the city, from disallowing the sale of fireworks. You know, with that, currently we would essentially allow the retail sale of fireworks in a C1 district and above, just because it's a retail use. As we look through our zoning code, there are uses that are appropriate in the M2 district that are deemed harmful by dust, gas, smoke, noise, fumes, odors, vibrations, soot, sudden fire or explosion, or any other nuisance. And so at this time, what we're looking to do is propose to add simply a use which would require a special use permit in the M2 district. We're still talking through that, but to just add the use, sale, and storage of fireworks and explosive devices in that location.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, anybody in the audience like to speak in regard to ORD 18-03? Seeing none, last call for questions from commissioners. We will close case number ORD 18-03, and that will conclude the public hearing for tonight. Move on to our regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Connell.
Present.
Hepner.
Here.
Ingram.
Present.
Killing.
Here.
Lammers.
Present.
Manus.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Report of City Council activity.
Nothing more to report.
Thank you. Secretary's report.
Second.
All in favor of the Secretary's report as printed, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it will move forward. Report of Comp Plan Committee.
Camiros, our consultant, will be in town April 3rd and 4th. We'll be having advisory committee meeting on the 3rd, and then the 4th, we're at least at staff level starting to look at the draft zoning ordinance or zoning map and assigning districts to the map. That, you know, ultimately will be, I think, of if people are going to be interested in the zoning ordinance, they're going to be probably more interested in the map than the code itself. So it may be a couple more months before we get that out for the public, but it's moving forward.
Thank you, Matt. Zoning activity, it appears we have none tonight. We'll move on to subdivision activity, old business, Commissioner Hepner.
I've got one case tonight, case number F18-01, revised final plat of Reed's Retreat located west of Wisconsin Avenue and north of Telegraph Road, containing 3 lots and 1 outlot, the ownership of which would remain with the rest of the unplatted ground on 17.79 acres, more or less. The property is zoned both R1 Low Density Dwelling District and A1 Agricultural District. Staff recommends the City and Planning and Zoning Commission forward case number F18-1, the final plat of Reed's Retreat, to the City Council for approval, subject to the following conditions, 3 conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number F18-01's been moved and seconded for discussion. Wayne?
I will also try and be fairly brief. You had Reed's Retreat, both a preliminary and final plat previously. Those included the larger area here. What the developer has done is they really didn't have any idea of what they wanted to do back here, so they've eliminated the preliminary plat and they've revised the final plat to the smaller quarter section, and I will use that term aliquot part. Both the zoning and land use, the plat will comply with that. This shows you the smaller area and then the plat itself. Basically, they are platting 3 residential lots. This outlot is a landlocked parcel, but there is a statement on the plat that it's to be tied with the ownership of the remaining parcel. So what they're doing this is they've platted this as an aliquot part. An aliquot part is a quarter section, a quarter section, a section. As long as they're doing that, they don't need to come back with a preliminary plat in a 4-lot subdivision. That's basically state law allows that to occur. So that's why the statement, this is going with the ownership of the remaining property. This is not being created as a landlocked parcel. It will be tied to the other properties. So it is a 3-lot final plat. Does conform to 2035. Plat proposes development for the southwest side. Those are the 3 conditions.
Thank you, Wayne. Commissioners have any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Connell.
Yes.
Hepner.
Yes.
Kelling.
Yes.
Lammers.
Yes.
Manus.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. The motion carries.
One new item of new business, case number P18-2, preliminary plat, Sang Meadows, located west of Northwest Boulevard and north of 46th Street, containing 58 residential lots and 1 outlot. Staff recommends City Plan and Zoning Commission forward the preliminary plat to the City Council for approval, subject to the following conditions, to 5 conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number P18-02 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Wayne, again?
Okay, this is a preliminary plat. The area, this is Northwest Boulevard, 53rd Street to the north. This is 46th Street down below, Marquette Street on the west in this area here. It is zoned R3, Moderate Density Dwelling District. Does allow for single-family development. It is residential general on the land use plan. This shows the development area. It kind of cuts around the church, existing church at this location. They are proposing 3 cul-de-sac type developments. A little bit of an extension of Marquette Street through here to incorporate the lots on the west side, which were left somewhat vacant when Emerald Woods, the subdivision down here, went in. They left that as an outlot, and now they're going ahead. A new developer is actually platting that area and extending the Marquette Street up to that portion. Does conform to our land use plan or land use map, Davenport 2035.
and we're proposing these 5 conditions. And the 80-foot right-of-way comment there is basically we want to maintain that existing corridor that's through there. 50 years from now, our city council may have some better ideas as to what they want to do with Marquette than our current council. So at this point in time, we don't want to lose it. We'd like to keep it there.
Thank you, Wayne. Commissioners, have any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Hepner.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Lammers.
Yes.
Manus.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. And Connell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hepner. Thank you, Wayne. At this time, we open up to, it looks like we have no future business to consider for next meeting. Anybody in the audience like to speak? Seeing none?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor for adjournment signify by aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Please drive home safely or wherever else you're going.